So good morning once again, everyone. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can, especially because most of the data and information that we are using to back our proposals for the RAMSAR sites have been given with much more detail by previous speakers, both today and yesterday. So I'm going to try to go straight to the point. So most of you would know what a RAMSAR site is, right? A wetland of importance, especially of international importance. It has been signed in 1971, and ever since then, it has 169 countries that have ratified it. Now, to ratify for the RAMSAR Convention, you need to have at least one of your sites approved internationally, so you can be listed within the over 2,200 RAMSAR sites that currently exist in the area. To establish a RAMSAR site, to get to the point of having the international recognition, you need to go through 3 different pillars, say steps. The first one is to have their concept of a wise use, which means that the country itself has to recognize the national importance of it. It has to come up with management plans and ideas and go through a legal process to have them approved nationally. And then it goes to the next step, which is the international recognition of it. It goes to the convention, which approves if it is internationally important or not. They base that in the importance of it for humankind. What's the value that it has for humankind? The third and final step that comes from those 2 first pillars or steps is actually having that recognition as a sort of international link in between countries, say activating transboundary conservation efforts. It adds value to a wetland to bring in potential conservation help from international partners. That's more or less how it works. Now, the Okavango Basin is over 700,000 square kilometers. It's huge. 3 countries, everyone knows that. Yet, less than 10% of it is included in the RAMSAR Convention list. It means that less percent of the Okavango Basin is given value, if you put things bluntly. All the value that the 720 square kilometers of this basin is literally concentrated in these 2 small pieces of the puzzle. The first area needs no introduction, the Okavango Delta. At the time that it was ratified in 1997, if I'm not mistaken, it was the largest RAMSAR site. It's not anymore. Its shape and size has been shifted throughout time. Now it's much smaller than it was initially. Now it's around 5,532,700 square kilometers. So it's around 55,000 hectares, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. It is a world-renowned place. It was one of the steps of adding value to it, of bringing the attention of people to this landscape, was through giving it a status of renowned value for the whole system. It is a beautiful place. I don't need to advocate for that. It is amazing, it is beautiful, and it deserves the value that it has been given by the RAMSAR Convention. The second one is a much, much smaller place, less than 50,000 hectares, much less known, but also of great value for ecotourism. It's the Bwabwata Okavango RAMSAR site, included within the National Park of Bwabwata, with the Mahango, thank you, within the Mahango site. Much, much smaller, 50,000 hectares, not as well known, but also with much more added value than the rest of the system that is not quantified. Now, again, beautiful place, there's no doubt about it, it deserves the value, but what about the rest of the system? What about the Angolan side of the system? How does its importance is viewed, and what is the value that it has within this old scheme of things? And remember, the more you add value to it, the more you draw attention to the fact that it needs to be preserved and conserved. And that's what we are trying to do, to establish a network of RAMSAR sites, or a single RAMSAR site, I'll get to that later, to add value to the area. Let's start there, just give value to it, more than just thinking straight about the biodiversity goals. Now, Angola has 11 Ramsar sites identified nationally. So they're still going through the wise use phase. They have been identified throughout the entire country with just a small complex at Tirico, around Tirico, that is part of the Okavango. They're still going through National Assembly. I think they have just been approved as a national site, and they want to move it forward to the next step, which is the international recognition. However, none of these, and definitely not the one further down the system in Angola of the Okavango, comprises one of the most important parts of the system. It has been spoken a lot about the water tower. Where does the water start? Where does this system start? Not just the Okavango, but the Zambezi has tributaries that start in that area. The Kwanza, which is a very important national river, has tributaries in the one single area. They're all 100 kilometers away from each other at best. It is a tiny, not so tiny area, just considering the area of the country is tiny, of around 120,000 square kilometers, where most rivers of that region of Africa and of Angola start. And that's where we want to add value to. That's the area that we need to draw attention and cope with the threats and the importance that it has, not just for Angola, but for Botswana and Namibia as well, for the entire system. So throughout our explorations, we have identified over 16 sites. We are around 20 now, that we consider to be of importance not just for the system in Angola, but internationally. Those include the Quito source, the Quanaval source, the Quando source, certain other very interesting source lakes. It also includes waterfalls and sites with traits that are very different from the rest of the system. Now, there was a lot of debate about how do we frame this, how do we put it? Do we propose for the 16 sites? Do we cluster them together? Because one thing that we have in mind, and it's very clear, is that this is us advocating for the need to be done, but it has to be done by the government. So we are proposing that these areas are giving the value and importance that they should have, but it has to come from them. The submission has to come from them. So I've played around, I have terrible drawing skills, but basically, after consultancy with John Mendelsohn, we have decided to propose one unique site, a site that will englobe all of these small or large source lakes, that will englobe all of the waterfalls and other sites that seem to have importance for the whole system. And we have handpicked and draw an idea to propose. So only after this map is actually approved, if it is approved, hopefully it will be approved, only after it is approved by the government can we start to polish it and come up with a specific plan and fill in the information sheet that is required. Now, this area includes a lot of forests, which might be a source of concern for some people because they say forests are not wetlands, which is obvious. But one has to consider that this forest is extremely important to actually maintain the system, maintain the water flow and the stability of the system. And if we don't include it in the protection scheme of things, we will be losing the system, even if we protect only its water. Now, to establish a RAMSAR site, you have to include at least one of 9 criteria established by the RAMSAR Convention. Namibia has 4 of them established or included in their information sheet. The Delta has 6 of them, based mostly on fish and ecological diversity. We might have the chance of actually have a bit of each of these 9 criteria into the area. Because the area is huge, it's extremely diverse, it has many different compositions per se, even though the species might be the same, but the composition itself may be very different. And we can kind of use that diversity to maximize the effort of submitting a RAMSAR site. One of them is the obvious: representativeness of the system, rare and unique sites. How does this area represent the system, and what does it have different from the system that adds value to it? Obviously, source lakes is the straightforward answers. It is where the water starts. The main source lakes are in that area. By itself, it's not just representing, but it's also quite rare and unique. You also have representation of certain portions of the system that you won't see in the delta and that you won't see in the Caprivi Strip when the river passes through these sites. You will have areas that literally act like a sponge to the system, and that's what we're trying to add value to. And of course, you have this one underwater crazy alien world that nowhere else you will find, not even the Cubango. This is unique to this part of the system. The purity of the water itself should be a reason just for people to see that it is quite awesome. Sorry. And of course, just how beautiful it is. And you won't see waterfalls this large anywhere else. Not even the Cubango that has rapids, not even the Namibian portion that also has rapids. None of them will be as high as, for example, the Quito source. Unless I'm completely wrong, you can correct me at any time. Another trait is the peat bogs. If I'm not mistaken, African peat bogs are extremely rare. Peat bogs by themselves are already rare. African peat bogs in tropical parts of the world, it's extremely rare. It's so rare, and in this area, it's so poorly studied that you don't even have them in the global data sets of the world. You see those stars over there, those are the source lakes that we've pointed out. And you see the purple parts represents these type of soils. And you see that in that source area, you have no information, you have no data. Yet, if you go there, you will see you are literally stepping on them to go to your tent. They are everywhere, they are widespread, and it adds an enormous importance for the system and for humankind because of its rarity, which is one of the building pillars of the RAMSAR sites. The second set of criteria englobe the status of species and also the ecological system and how it is being managed or handled or explored. Now, I don't need to say that we have a high biodiversity in the area. It has been said in the past 2 days. It's not as high as in the Delta yet, but it is significant enough to say that this is a highly biodiverse part of the system. And we have had proof that we have vulnerable species breeding in the area, and that itself is amazing. We found a population of wattle crane breeding in that area, and that was, according to Steve, because I'm terrible with birds, according to Steve, an amazing finding. And you do have all the predators that indicate that the system is still healthy and can still be applied conservation measures just to improve it instead of having the effort of transferring from one side to the other. But with the thing, it is highly threatened, and if nothing is done in the, say, next decade, we will lose it. So we have to start showing this, and we have to start applying the knowledge that we know to show people how important and valuable it is. Another set of criteria that we fit right into that is the fish community. How does it represent the whole system, and how important is the site for maintaining that diversity? It's obvious, I don't have to say much about it. You have species, even the common ones, but also some that are less known. You have them breeding in different parts of the area that I've shown, in different lakes. You have a whole system for fish that is quite amazing. You have a diversity that really represents a lot of the system itself. Not just that, you actually have new records, not new species, but new records for the system that are not described elsewhere in the system. You don't find the gorgeous barb elsewhere, or we haven't sampled the gorgeous barb elsewhere apart from these source lakes. There are 4 potentially new species to science. That itself shows potential endemism, which is very important for these 2 criteria. And both the unknown species and the very well-known species, they're all breeding there. They have babies, they have teenagers, they have adults. They are all there in different parts of the system. Now, I've skipped 2 criteria, which is criteria number 2 and number 3, because we might be able to be in them, we just not have enough data to do so, which is regarding water birds, which is what most RAMSAR sites are based their submission on. We have around 367 species of birds identified for the area. Of course, not all of them are water birds. Some are forest birds. I don't know the proportion exactly. I don't think we have that number yet. But I think we can start making advances in research that could help us determine not just the density, but the distribution of this fish, to help us realize whether we fit in this criteria or not. How many water birds go through the area? Where are they? Why are they? Is it migration? Is it a permanent population? What do we have? And I think further research in the years to come, we're still an embryo. We still have limited data with the efforts that we do. But as research goes along, we might be able to answer that question and provide more background on it. The same thing for the non-avian species. Again, we have 24 potentially new species to science. That means 24 potential endemic species. That means this criteria would fit right in. So with this, you would have all 9 criteria within this site, which is not seen in any other RAMSAR site in the world and makes it extremely unique. As a management plan, like I said, we still need to polish the borders. We need to polish the borders and understand how that fits into the plans of the government. Do they accept it or not? Do they want to change it or not? How our information sheet will look like. And only then, only when we have, can we help to provide information and back up the development of a management plan. But we do have the resources to do that. Like Rainer said, we are deploying, hopefully successfully, we are deploying environment parameter readers and sensors to have climate parameters, climate data that we can use to monitor how the area is going through the different characteristics. And we are also, of course, engaging with the communities, because them, better than no one else, will know how the system shifted through time and might shift in the future. Them better than anyone can describe if something wrong is happening or not. And that is also particularly important because the area is extremely inaccessible. It is very difficult to get there, and it's very difficult to get or to come up with regular plans to physically monitor the area. So by engaging with the people that actually live there and that we can trust, because we have established relationships with them, we can by far increase the potential we have to manage the area. I speak very fast. I am done.